Another thing that I think is important for advisors to keep in mind is that it's your job to inoculate your client from the psychological and emotional impact of the buyer courtship. And so I talked about this a little bit earlier in today's discussion, but if we take Gary, for example, Gary was wined and dined by Chris and John. They flew him first class, steaks at Gibson's, courtside at the Bulls. They flew him up to Chicago a half dozen times. And they've invested a lot in him. And, they fawn over him. They adore him. They get him, right? And so for a lot of these business owners that are effectively toiling in the vineyard, and then there's interest in them, there's interest in their company, it becomes very intoxicating. And, I've had clients say to me, well, the guys at Cedar Fork Capital, took me out to all these dinners and sports games and they spent a lot of money and, well, no shit. That's their job. They're attempting to buy your business at a $30 million discount. I would say the 25 grand that they spent on entertaining you is probably a great return on investment, right? I mean, clients often do not understand what's going on. They can't feel it. I mean, when John and Chris demonstrate to Gary how much they like him, I mean, Gary's naturally going to like them. And when they spend all of this money on Gary, he's automatically going to want to reciprocate. I had a conversation with a client once who called me up because he ran into a issue on a deal. He was just like Gary. He got approached by private equity, went out, met with a bunch of these different guys, and then he started getting the sneaking suspicion that he was being underpaid for his business. So let's say this is a $50 million firm, and he thought, well, maybe it's worth 75, but I'm not quite sure. And he had his own Chris and John that he was dealing with. They flew him here and there. They had dinners, met the family. And at dinner one night, he sat down with him and said, hey, I really like you guys, but, I only get one shot at this. And, I'm thinking about talking to an advisor. And they came back to him and said, hey, you could do that. But number one, we'll pay you top dollar. And by the way, that statement in and of itself is impossible to disprove. I mean, by definition, it's true. They're going to pay him top dollar, whatever that is. But they said, hey, the boss man wouldn't really be happy with us, John and Chris, if he found out, we spent all this money on you and really built this great relationship and we thought we had some sort of a deal, and then you were going to bring an advisor on and the advisor would just shop us and find a different partner and so on and so forth. And he called me and he, for weeks, had a very hard time meeting with anyone else because he didn't want to cheat on John and Chris. And these guys liked him. They spent time and money and effort on him. He didn't want to disappoint them. He had a natural inclination to reciprocate their generosity by doing the deal with them so that they would look good in front of their boss. It is a very intoxicating and very powerful psychological force that I see in play all the time. So as an advisor, your job is to inoculate your clients. I don't care who's spending what money, taking them to whatever game, buying them whatever steaks and sushi. At the end of the day, the private equity firms or strategics, not just PE, but any sophisticated buyer will take this approach because they know that their worst enemy is competition, right? Number one. Number two, the seller needs to like them. And number three, the seller will reciprocate, right? And it's not going to be kind for kind, right? If they spend a lot of money and take him to games and so on and so forth, he'll reciprocate that goodwill by not talking to another party, for example. And so it's very powerful. Sellers oftentimes don't realize that it's actually happening because they really do feel bad. I mean, this guy actually legitimately felt bad. These guys spent a lot of time, money, and effort on me, wined me and dined me. Now the boss is going to be upset with them. I couldn't do it. You know what? Could we really do better? Like, is there really a better deal out there for me? And what it did is it mentally closed off his mind from options, right? Like, yeah, like I'm not particularly excited about this girl, but I've gone on a lot of dates with her, and like, is there really a better option out there? And then you come from a mindset of scarcity. You close yourself off to optionality. When you close yourself off to optionality, you don't have nearly as much resolve when you negotiate. So, advisors, it's your job to explain to your client the dynamics of this. And I always say, like, every buyer out there, if you're out there and you want to buy a business yourself, you should watch what the sophisticated players are doing, because they've had a tremendous amount of experience in what works. And what works is you want to make sure that the seller believes that price is objective, right? No one else, there's a going rate and I'm paying top dollar. No one can do better. I really love you. I'm the guy who really recognizes everything that you've done in your life, what you built, how special you are. And by the way, I'm going to take you here. I'm going to take you there. I'm going to spend money on you and just show you how much I care about you. It becomes very difficult for sellers to look at other folks. So that's a play that all buyers should use, and it's extremely detrimental to sellers if it's not counteracted. So you as an advisor are an antidote to this, and how you do that is, of course, you stack the deck and you bring in a bunch of other buyers. And now when 5 or 10 different buyers are fawning over the seller and taking them to dinners and flying them places, well, now they're just one of the crew. They're not the only girl at the bar. So the guy who called me wondering if he was leaving some cash on the table and didn't want to offend the buyer ultimately ended up seriously offending and insulting the buyer. He ultimately engaged us. We took him out to a full process. His purchase price ended up being like a ridiculous, like 20 or 30% more than what he had originally was ready to ink a deal for. And we attempted to bring that buyer into the process. They didn't even want to play. You know, they basically said, this is insulting. We spent so much time, money, and effort with this guy. He dragged us on, and now he goes out to process. And I can understand how they feel about that. But at the end of the day, that's what you need to do as a buyer, right? And so, in a lot of these masterclasses, I tend to focus on emotions and psychology. And, we can play around with Excel spreadsheets and weighted average cost of capital and multiples all we want. But at the end of the day, it is really the psychology and the emotions behind this that drives these transactions. And this buyer was trying to effectively corral him into a one buyer auction, which is a losing proposition. Here at Potomac, we love to kill it for our clients. And I think that education is the cornerstone which allows our clients to make the best decisions for themselves. The more you can understand about the nuances of how strategic acquirers work, how the operations of private equity firms work, and the psychology and the tactics of an M&A transaction, the better you're going to be when it comes time to pull the trigger. If you own a business and you're being contacted by strategic acquirers, search funds, private equity firms, and you're trying to size up what you might do, take a step back and give us a call. We'll help you forge a plan, whether that exit is a year from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. We'll help you think through a plan that is specifically tailored to your financial goals and objectives. So please contact us directly. I've put a link to the contact form in the description of this video, and you can also contact me directly on LinkedIn. Again, you can click on the link below to download the questions you should ask private equity. This is a culmination of 20 plus years and billions of dollars in transaction with private equity. And these are the questions that I recommend clients ask private equity firms before they do a transaction. It's probably something you're not going to want to miss. Further, if you got value from this video, you're not going to want to miss what we have coming up here in the coming weeks. We'll be doing the Valuation Masterclass. We'll be kicking off the Buy-Side M&A Masterclass, and we've got a lot more to say on private equity. And feel free to share this Masterclass series with somebody who you think might benefit from it. Again, I'm Paul Giannamore. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next one.